Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The federal government has extended the ban on all flights from India and Pakistan. We will tell you for how much longer. As we head into the May-long weekend, Mothers Against Drunk Driving has launched a new campaign showing the dangers of drinking and driving. And new public health restrictions are being implemented in Manitoba as that province faces a record number of COVID-19 cases.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Thanks so much for joining us. Around 1.4 million doses of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine are being delivered ahead of schedule this week. However, the Public Health Agency of Canada says it's no longer confident it will receive another 6 to 8 million doses of the Moderna vaccine next month. Provincial leaders say they're counting on increased vaccine availability to allow more people to be vaccinated as economies gradually reopen. Health officials say advice on whether provinces can mix and match vaccine types will be given early next month. Transport Canada is extending the ban on incoming flights from India and Pakistan for another month. The flight ban that began on April 22nd was set to expire on Saturday. Officials say it will be extended until June the 21st. The ban has cut down the number of international flights arriving in Canada with at least one passenger who later tests positive for COVID-19. The Alberta government has announced some new COVID-19 quarantine rules. Fully vaccinated Albertans no longer have to quarantine if they're exposed to COVID-19 and are not showing any symptoms. As for people who've had one shot, their isolation time has been reduced. Until Thursday, people were legally required to quarantine for 14 days when a close contact was confirmed to have been infected with the virus. All other restrictions still apply to people who have not had any vaccine and those who return from international travel. Many Canadians are feeling isolated and lonely during the pandemic. Pastor Ralph Molyneux with My Victory Church here in Lethbridge says what's difficult is how that loneliness can impact our mental health and make it seem like no one cares.
Loneliness can cause us to maybe feel like people don't care for us, that they don't love us. And then our response to them can sometimes be out of anger or, frustration. And then that only increases our loneliness because who wants to be around somebody who's always angry and bitter? So you kind of go back to what God's word says is be forgiving and be kind and be gentle, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. They're just some practical things, but the first thing we want to really look at is to be honest with ourselves.
Pastor Ralph will also discuss the importance of connecting with others and the creative ways we can reach out. That interview with Jeanette Rocher is coming up later in our newscast. Medicine Hat Mayor Ted Clugston says he refuses to acknowledge that there could be a fourth wave of COVID-19, especially with so many people being vaccinated. As Ainsley O'Reilly explains, the mayor says the gas city handled the pandemic differently than many others in the province.
When it comes to COVID-19 response, the city of Medicine Hat took a different approach than most municipalities. When the pandemic began, the region's numbers were significantly lower than the rest of the province. And even when the second wave hit, case totals were much lower than other areas. Its government made the decision to not declare a state of emergency.
This wasn't a state of local emergency, and that's where the other municipalities made a mistake, in my opinion. I'm not afraid to declare states of emergency. I've declared more than any other mayor in the province of Alberta, city mayor, for other events, from floods to windstorms.
The city's emergency response team says a big part of the pandemic effort has been extensive communication with residents.
Providing regular updates to the public. We were doing this on a weekly basis, even sometimes more than weekly, sometimes daily for that matter.
Mayor Ted Clugston says he's felt absolutely handcuffed by the provincial restrictions.
Whatever I thought of their decisions, not to be too vocal as to what I would have done or what I think they're doing wrong.
For businesses, the city made $2 million available, up to $15,000 for each business, to get back on their feet in different ways.
Pivot, that new word pivot, whatever it may be. It could have been to build patios for your restaurants, to a new tire changing station for a Mr. Lube.
In an election year, Clugston could be one of the only mayors in the province seeking another term.
I feel that I want to finish what I'd started.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Mothers Against Drunk Driving is once again reminding drivers to make a conscious effort to not get behind the wheel if they're impaired this May-long weekend. The Crashed Car campaign is a simulated car crash that shows drivers the dangers of driving under the influence. President of the Lethbridge area chapter, Anita Huchala, says the main goal of the campaign is to get conversation started.
Always devastating to a family who has lost a loved one to an impaired driver, because the death obviously is so sudden and it's senseless. It's 100% preventable, and that's something that our message is strong on that vehicle. The crashed car it's 17 letters, 3 simple words: don't drive impaired. It really truly is that simple.
The Crashed Car initiative runs from May 20th to September 7th. A 20-year-old Lethbridge man is dead following a collision with a semi-truck earlier today. Coaldale RCMP say the Dodge Dakota he was driving collided with the semi hauling metal pipes traveling on Highway 23 south of Nobleford Traffic Circle. The accident occurred around 4 o'clock this morning. The driver of the Dodge Dakota died at the scene, while the driver of the semi along with his passenger were shaken but not injured. At this point of the investigation, police say no charges will be laid. A new Sugar Beets research project from Lethbridge College is set to receive a huge financial boost. The initiative will use automation and wireless technology to improve the storage of sugar beets. As Micah Quinn explains, close to $250,000 is being awarded for the project.
Chandra Singh is the Applied Research Chair in Agricultural Engineering and Technology at Lethbridge College's Center for Applied Research, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship. Singh says that the project's goal is to monitor the temperature of sugar beets wirelessly.
So if we are able to monitor the beet temperature wirelessly and send that data to the cloud, and then also get the weather data from the location and use it to automate the aeration. So by aeration means that you keep the beet temperature cool towards the target temperature during the storage period, so the spoilage can be prevented. So that's the project we are looking at.
Over $236,000 was awarded to Singh through the Smart Agriculture, Food Digitization, and Automation Challenge from Alberta Innovates. Sugar beet farming and processing is a huge contributor to the southern Alberta economy, providing on average $32.2 million in farm receipts each year.
Even if we can reduce by this technology by 25% in terms of the total production, that 25% is still a huge number. So I'm looking forward to work on this project and help the growers reduce their post-harvest losses.
The project is part of a 3-year, over $404,000 research collaboration with Lethbridge College, Lantic, and the Alberta Sugar Beet Growers, and OP Systems, who will provide technical support. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Lethbridge has a very rich and diverse Asian population. Many families from all over the continent are happy to call the Windy City their home. As we continue through Asian Heritage Month, BCN's Naveen Day learns more about those who came here from India to help Lethbridge grow as a city.
While anti-Asian hate crimes surge in the U.S., here in Canada, Asian culture is embraced. And closer to home in Lethbridge, newcomers from India have helped shape the fields of medicine, microbiology, and agriculture. Dr. Surya Acharya gives us a glimpse into what Lethbridge's Indian population looked like when newcomers came here as early as the 1960s.
They were mainly teachers or, say, professionals like engineers and doctors. We had lots of doctors at that time here, and there was also another research scientist like me at the Lethbridge Research Center. So many of them were professors in the university. So in essence, I think most of them were from the professional category in those days.
As the faculties in Lethbridge grew, so did the population of Indian newcomers. Acharya says many of his people can be seen in academics and research.
There were only 1 or 2 professors in those days, but now there are a lot more. They are in specialized subjects like microbiology and things like that, but there are also people from other disciplines too.
Once the institutions had more to offer, that attracted even more Indians to the Windy City. Suketu Shah, who is vice president of the Gujarati Society of Lethbridge and area, says word of mouth about how amazing Lethbridge is spread quickly.
We started looking at more growth since 2013 and 14 as kids started telling people that, there is a city, Lethbridge, which is close to Calgary in Alberta, in Calgary, Alberta, which is like only 2 hours. But, it's not that big, but, it is amazing that we have everything what you need here.
According to the 2016 census, close to 175,000 South Asians reside in Alberta. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
With all of the snow we've received recently in southwestern Alberta, it's been quite easy to get into the NHL playoffs this season. For our online poll question this week, we asked you, which Canadian team will go the farthest in the NHL playoffs? We had a tie for top spot. Both the Winnipeg Jets and Toronto Maple Leafs had 38% of the vote. The Edmonton Oilers were next with 21%, and the Montreal Canadiens were last with only around 3% of the vote. Make sure you log on to our website, bridgecitynews.ca, again next week to take part in our newest poll. Cooler weather is helping fire crews in Saskatchewan get a fast-moving wildfire near Prince Albert under control. The Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency says the nearly 5,600-hectare fire has not grown in the past 24 hours and air quality is improving. The fire, which broke out on Monday, forced dozens of evacuations and damaged power infrastructure. More than 8,000 customers were without electricity in some areas. Power is expected to be fully restored later this evening. Wildfires in Manitoba's northern Interlake region have forced at least 750 people from their homes. The biggest fire is burning over a massive area north of Lake Manitoba and is affecting several nearby communities. 5 First Nations communities have been forced to flee due to the fire and smoke. They include evacuations in Lake St. Martin, Little Saskatchewan, and Dauphin River First Nations. Evacuees are staying in Dauphin and Winnipeg. New public health restrictions will kick in Saturday morning as Manitoba faces a record number of COVID-19 cases. The new rules will ban virtually all social gatherings between members of different households, even outdoors. The province's chief public health officer says the main message is to stay home for now.
We have to take these stronger actions to protect Manitobans, to protect our healthcare system. It's of course frustrating because we've been at this for so long, but we can see from our numbers that it's absolutely required to change what we're doing right now. We've had very strict public health orders in place. Despite that, we've seen our case numbers climb. So we need to change what we're doing right now. We made a dramatic shift in the amount of contacts we have.
Late Thursday, health officials announced a record 603 new cases in Manitoba. Some Toronto vaccine clinics are offering Pfizer-BioNTech vaccines to teenagers this week. Teens were lined up outside of a Toronto school for a pop-up clinic. Ontario aims to open appointments for everyone 12 and older the week of May 31st.
We basically just saw everybody's Instagram and them posting about the vaccine. And so I kind of pressured my parents I want to get the vaccine because I heard so many good things about it. And I heard how it could benefit the community as a whole. So I'm like, why not?
Yesterday we did pretty much close to 1,200. So today, so far, I think we are already around 500. Out of the 1,200 people who were vaccinated, we got data from 900 people, and we only got 16% of the poster code we are targeting. We get more than 50% of the kids, and people are coming from around, those who are driving. So more Caucasian, less visible minorities.
There are some major concerns when it comes to Conservative leader Erin O'Toole's recently released carbon tax plan. Now, that's according to Ross McKittrick, who's a professor of economics at the University of Guelph. McKittrick says Canadians are already struggling, so discussing a new tax may not be a good plan of attack right now for the Conservatives.
One of my concerns with the Conservative approach to this is I think they recognize that this is not a good time to impose really costly measures on the economy, and these are not policies that have a very strong motivation behind them. And yet at the same time, they're saying they're going to achieve the Paris targets just as fast or even faster than the Liberals. I don't think they can square those two halves or they can't reconcile those two halves of their position.
Catch the full interview with Ross McKittrick, who discusses the pros and cons of a federal carbon tax. That's coming up after Business News. U.S. President Joe Biden hailed the impending ceasefire in the fighting between Israel and Hamas. He says he sees a genuine opportunity toward the larger goal of building a lasting peace in the Middle East.
Folks, I've just spoken with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Earlier today, I spoke with President al-Sisi of Egypt. Prime Minister Netanyahu informed me that Israel has agreed to a mutual unconditional ceasefire to begin in less than 2 hours. The Egyptians have now informed us that Hamas and the other groups in Gaza have also agreed. In my conversation with President Netanyahu, I commended him for the decision to bring the current hostilities to a close within less than 11 days. I also emphasized what I've said throughout this conflict. The United States fully supports Israel's right to defend itself against indiscriminate rocket attacks from Hamas and other Gaza-based terrorist groups that have taken the lives of innocent civilians in Israel.
Lifeguards rescued 10 people off the San Diego coast yesterday in an apparent migrant smuggling attempt with a small boat. Authorities say one person who was found underwater was pronounced dead on the beach.
One of our agents actually spotted the vessel northbound off the coast of Point Loma and responded in an attempt to interdict the vessel. In La Jolla off of Marine Street, where the agents first encountered the vessel, there were several subjects in the water in distress. So we notified lifeguards, San Diego Fire lifeguard, who deployed to assist us with the rescue efforts.
When lifeguards got on scene, we worked in coordination with the U.S. Coast Guard and their assets, as well as Border Patrol and the assets that they had at scene. Lifeguards rescued 10 victims from in the water and initiated CPR on another victim who was later pronounced. The conditions out there today were rough. We have 4 to 6 foot surf and some heavy currents.
We were able to apprehend 15 individuals. All of the individuals were determined to be unlawfully present inside the United States and were transported to a Border Patrol station for processing.
Well, we had a cooler day again in much of southwestern Alberta with light flurries, but fortunately, it looks like we'll be getting back to more spring-like conditions very soon. Full weather details are on deck. You know, it was so nice to see some of the snow we recently received begin to melt. Jeanette Roche is here now with a complete look at the weather picture. Jeanette, we should maybe top up our windshield washer fluid this May long weekend since the meltdown will continue.
Yeah, maybe not a bad idea, Hal, although keep in mind we are still expecting another 60% chance of flurries overnight tonight. -1 dropping down to in temperature tonight. A decent weekend in store for us, though, with a mix of sun and cloud. 9 degrees the high, getting a bit warmer for Sunday, 16. So this might be where you need that windshield wiper fluid as that snow starts to melt. Looking at a lot of precipitation next week, beginning Sunday night, 60% chance of showers. Sunday night going into Monday with rain, 20 degrees the high, mainly overcast on Tuesday, 17 the high. Then rain beginning again Tuesday night and going right through Wednesday into Thursday of next week. 12 degrees the high for Wednesday, 13 the high for Thursday. So certainly looking at a lot of precipitation in the form of snow and rain coming up in the next week. Average temperature highs for this time of year, 19 degrees. Average low, 5 degrees. 32 was our high temperature back in 1980. And in 2001, we had our chilliest day on record, which was -4. 5:39 is when the sun woke up this morning and our evening sunset. 9:17, not too bad for Friday night, although we are still looking at some flurries this evening. That should be gone soon enough, though. Looking pretty nice on the west coast. Sunshine, Victoria 22, a bit windy in the Juan de Fuca Strait. Winds up to 50 km per hour. 18 degrees the high in Vancouver, 17 in Edmonton, 12 in Calgary. Beautiful sunny day across the rest of Alberta for tomorrow. Both those Alberta cities, not too bad with the wind either, 20 kilometers per hour. Not bad at all, I say. Saskatoon, sunshine, 12 degrees, 8 degrees in Regina with mainly overcast skies. Now, Winnipeg could be seeing a chance of showers and a risk of an afternoon thunderstorm tomorrow. Also, their winds are going to be a little bit more gusty, up to 50 km per hour. Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal, all of these cities looking at a 30% chance of showers tomorrow with risks of afternoon thunderstorms. 40K winds in Toronto and Ottawa, and we're looking at a little bit more windy gusts in Montreal. Fredericton, 22 the high there, mix of sun and cloud. Halifax looking at a chance of showers, 15 degrees the high. 15 the high in Charlottetown as well, with some showers expected there. 16 degrees the high in St. John's, Newfoundland with 40K winds. So there you go. That is your weekend weather.
More than 500 WestJet employees in Calgary and Vancouver have been unionized. The airport agents, which include baggage handlers, announced that they will be represented by Unifor. They join more than 7,000 other unionized airline workers with Unifor under carriers like Air Canada and Air Canada Jazz. 4 grain inspection and weighing service fees will be reduced on August 1st pending approval. The Canadian Grain Commission says the proposal is in response to high grain export volumes. It is also trying to better align fee revenue with fixed service delivery costs. Beginning in the 2021-2022 crop year, the fees would be reduced by 19%. The proposed changes require an amendment to the Canada Grain regulations, and stakeholders have until June 7th to provide feedback. Around 74% of this year's crop in Saskatchewan is now seeded. That's according to the Saskatchewan Agriculture Ministry, which says that is well ahead of the 5-year average of 48% for this time of year. Producers have been able to seed without any prolonged delays due to minimal rain and warm weather. The province says there was scattered rain in most regions, but more moisture is still needed. Some farmers have halted seeding canola while they wait for rain, while others are seeding wheat or other cereals instead. CP Rail says it is still seeking regulatory approval to acquire Kansas City Southern, even though the U.S. Railway has accepted a rival bid from CN Rail. The Calgary-based railway says it is proceeding with this application in case the deal with CN is unable to move forward. The board at KCS called off a $25 billion U.S. deal with CP earlier this month after determining a $33.6 billion offer from CN was superior. But CP argued that it is no longer the case due to the regulator's decision that stricter merger rules will be used to evaluate CN's voting trust. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 15 points on the day to finish at 19,527. The Dow was up 123 points to 34,208. The S&P 500 was down 3 points to 4156, and the Nasdaq was down 64 points on the day to 13,471. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.97 to $63.91 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 2 cents to $2.90 US. Gold was down $4.04 to $18.8125 US an ounce, and silver was down 19 cents to $27.56 US an ounce. Wheat is at $332 per metric ton, barley's at $340, canola's at $708, and corn is at $397 per metric ton. Live cattle are up $1.08 to $117.68, feeder cattle were up $1.48 to $137.23, and lean hogs were up $1.98 to $114.23. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 82.85 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Alberta government has announced some new COVID-19 quarantine rules. Fully vaccinated Albertans no longer have to quarantine if they're exposed to COVID-19 and are not showing any symptoms. You know, many Canadians are angry that we have to pay a federal carbon tax, especially when so many business owners are struggling during the pandemic. There are others, however, who are in favor of the levy. Coming up, an interview with Dr. Ross McKittrick, an economics professor at the University of Guelph, who will discuss the pros and cons of a federal carbon tax. That interview is coming up shortly. The federal government's plan to impose a $170 per ton carbon tax in place nationally by the year 2030 will result in 30,000 fewer jobs here in Alberta. Now, that's according to a new study released by the Fraser Institute. Joining me now to talk about it from Guelph, Ontario, is the co-author of the study, Dr. Ross McKittrick, a professor of economics at the University of Guelph and a senior fellow at the Fraser Institute. Dr. Ross, welcome back to Bridge City News. Now, the federal government has said the higher carbon tax will have almost zero impact on the economy, but your study suggests otherwise and will in fact have a major impact on employees across the country, including here in Alberta. Now, you estimate a 1.8% decline in gross domestic product. How did you actually come up with that number? So, Dr. Ross, when the government says don't worry about it, this will have zero impact on the economy, what do you think they're really basing that on? I was chatting with Dan McTagg, former Liberal MP and president for Canadians for Affordable Energy, and he says this carbon tax is really an attack on humanity, especially with the Liberals saying they want to go to net zero emissions by the year 2050. Now, Dr. Ross, one of the arguments used by supporters of the carbon tax is that Canadian workers will be okay because of the carbon tax rebate. How would you respond to that? Now, we tend to think of the carbon tax affecting the price of fuel and our home heating as well, but what about other areas this will have an immediate impact on when it comes to our cost of living? You know what, exactly, I'm thinking as well of jet fuel, and hopping on an airplane to go visit my kids out in Southern Ontario. It'll cost me more as well because Air Canada or WestJet, they're going to pass the increased cost onto me, the consumer, right? So yeah, it'll impact so many different people. Right. Now, as far as fighting climate change goes, to what degree will the carbon tax affect emissions? How effective will it really be? Business owners have been hit very, very hard during the pandemic, especially with the lockdowns and the restrictions. There was a report from Restaurants Canada, more than 10,000 restaurants have gone under so far across the country. Now let's talk about a carbon tax on top of the restrictions and the lockdowns. What kind of an impact will the carbon tax have on a lot of business owners? Now, Dr. Ross, do you have any thoughts on Conservative leader Erin O'Toole's newly released climate plan that includes a $20 per ton carbon charge on fuel? Will this be effective, or is it even actually a carbon tax? How about the Biden administration, now that they're in power here with the Democrats in the United States? Are they also trying to meet these Paris targets? Dr. Ross McKittrick, Professor of Economics at the University of Guelph, thanks for joining me today.
Loneliness is often an issue in our society, but with the COVID pandemic, it appears to be on the increase. What's the best way to deal with this? Joining me to discuss this further is Ralph Molyneux. He is the site pastor at Victory Church in Lethbridge. Welcome to Bridge City News, Pastor Ralph. It's so great to have you on today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Pastor Ralph, a recent Ipsos poll revealed that 54% of Canadians say that they're feeling lonely and isolated. So, is this consistent with what you're observing in people here in Southern Alberta, with your pastoring and your counseling?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some, depending on personality types, are dealing with it better, and some people, they're still doing all the work that they normally did, but others who were forced to isolate and maybe hadn't, cut back on their connections, I can see that being extremely difficult for them. And not only loneliness, but relationship struggles. People's emotional health is struggling because of their emotional, just the things that they're going through.
Exactly. I think it caught everyone by surprise. And all of a sudden we're just finding ourselves in this situation with loneliness. Now, it's interesting that medical studies show that loneliness can cause a number of health issues, including depression, anxiety, increased risks of dementia, and even 26% increased risk of death. So this isn't a trivial thing at all, is it?
No, it's not. And I like that they mention it as a state of health, because those things can deteriorate over time and we don't notice it, so your emotional health and that loneliness, that part of it can just whittle away at you over time. Like, we used to celebrate weddings with large groups of people, and then in times of struggles like funerals, where you used to have those connections, but with a period of time that we don't normally have that in our life, then that deteriorates our overall emotional health. And it can happen like the frog in the boiling water. It happens to a point where all of a sudden people are by themselves and not able to process some of the things they're struggling with.
Absolutely. I'm sure you're seeing that a lot with your counseling, especially like you said, funerals. We can't be together to grieve our loved one. We can't be together to celebrate somebody getting married. It's just tough.
Yeah. Yeah. The funerals are, the physical touch, none. There's no hugging. I'm not a person that likes to hug a whole bunch, just my personality type. But at times like that, it's non-existent. So there's more times in our life that we experience these changes that again whittle away at our emotional health.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you mentioned physical touch, because doctors, of course, say that it's so important, that physical touch is crucial, right? So apparently our health even increases significantly when we get regular hugs and handshakes, and maybe it needs to be done while wearing a mask. I don't know, but we do need that, don't we?
Yeah, we do. And I think I've heard it explained this way before, but because that's lacking, I think it was Dr. Townsend or Dr. Cloud, one of the Christian psychologists, said that we all love steak. We all love a good steak, but hamburgers are good too. So it's not the way that we're connecting isn't the best way, but it's still got some value to it, and we have to look at the bright side on that. When we can't have the physical hugs and those types of things, then at least to connect virtually is still better than nothing.
Yeah, so I was just going to ask you, Pastor Ralph, do you have any thoughts on how to overcome loneliness? I mean, the obvious solution is to spend more time with others, but that becomes a real challenge, obviously, during these COVID times. So people, of course, are making the use of technology, like you said.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to do is to give yourself an assessment and be honest with yourself and true to yourself. If you're noticing that you're withdrawing from things, or you're finding there's conflict in your relationships, which is what we see a lot of, that conflict increases, and that means that there's something missing from your life. And if you kind of analyze it and see where you're at, you can find some next steps to do. It's the right thing, because loneliness can cause us to maybe feel like people don't care for us, that they don't love us. And then our response to them can sometimes be out of anger or, frustration. And then that only increases our loneliness, because who wants to be around somebody who's always angry and bitter? So you kind of go back to what God's word says, is be forgiving and be kind and be gentle, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. They're just some practical things, but the first thing we want to really look at is to be honest with ourselves. And then I think sometimes people get tired and want to just fix things for people, when really all they're asking for possibly is just a bit of empathy, to understand that they're struggling. And it's in that empathetic moments that we can really connect at a deeper level with people. So I think just to be kind of in tune with what's going on, and look at our environment, what we've been experiencing, and then be more prepared that way, and not over expecting things from other people, because that can be a real a drag on people. If all you ever talk to is that one friend that's just always got so much going wrong, your tendency might not be so much to connect with them, which is the exact opposite of what they need. They just need someone just to hear them. They may not need all the answers or the solutions. Just a lending an ear is really important.
Yeah, for sure. Now, like we said, technology can help, but with some of the older generation, a lot of them might not be as technically savvy. So, I mean, it's still okay to use the telephone as much as possible, get connected with people. But of course, medical experts say that there are significantly greater benefits to social relationships by making time for those face-to-face visits. So I guess the question here is, what is the risk or benefit ratio of visiting people in person during these times?
Well, I think we have to analyze those individuals, because I've met with many of our seniors, and we when COVID first hit, we did what we called CareNet, where we called every single person, and we empowered a bunch of people to call people, which is very unusual. To get a call from a stranger nowadays is like, why are you calling me? But because of the times, we found it really necessary. And I noticed the seniors that I spoke with were so appreciative of just a call or a contact. Because I don't know. I think when we get older, and I'm getting older, I don't know that we get out as much anyways, and I'm not belittling the importance of that initial contact, but I think our seniors are pretty resilient people. But just a touch or a phone call, and or a driveway visit, or a visit through a door, just a few moments of connectivity, I found to be so beneficial, especially with our senior crowd.
Oh, exactly. I know my own mother is in that situation, and I feel like for the past year, it's been nothing more than just really quick, hand each other something in the driveway or through my car door. It's very challenging, because you want to spend all this quality time. And of course, now it's getting warmer outside, so we can arrange for more meetings outdoors. So is that a good solution as well? Meet at a coffee shop patio?
Absolutely. I've been doing a lot of Zoom counseling mainly because to meet someone in person, if you're indoors, you should be wearing a mask.
Yeah.
But another thing I've been doing is walks, and there's multiple benefits from that. So you'll see me 2 or 3 times a week walking around Henderson, just connecting with somebody around, I know, the lake here in our town, and or the coulees. And I think, again, if we look at it in a positive way, I just say, hey, how'd you like to go for a walk? And then the individuals typically go, yeah, I'm up for that. And then you're both, there's multiple benefits to that, but it feels good to be outdoors as well. But then to see their face not behind a mask is also really important.
Oh, absolutely. Now, how can churches help relieve loneliness? Any thoughts on how to include people who are on their own?
Well, we've just launched a Facebook campus, so there's much more connectivity during the service, because what we found is many people were just watching the screen as a church, and you can watch a screen anywhere, but we were responding much more one-on-one in that aspect through our Facebook campus, which just launched. But we still invite people out, and then we watch that connectivity online, and then ask them if there's anything. Just ask them if there's anything we can do, for them. They need a hand with something. Is it a physical need, or maybe it's finances or groceries or things like that. And then in that, we also have been inviting people to begin to serve, because I found that many people wanted to be busy doing something rather than sitting in an empty house. So at that point, we said, well, let's empower you to do those care calls. And how would you like to connect with 10 people each week, just to see how they're doing, just a 10-minute conversation or 3-minute conversation. So to get people active, I think, is a real key thing to keep the loneliness down, because, we're made on purpose for a purpose. And when that changes, we need to get active and just say, okay, look, we're just not going to sit locked up. There's things we can do even in that state. And churches have been, I believe, instrumental in caring for that health of other individuals in our community through this whole deal.
That's wonderful. Now, for disabled individuals, the loneliness factor apparently doubles, and that's something to keep in mind during these times, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I hats off to anybody who's caring for an individual, because, in some cases it's a matter of life and death. But I think through the studies and things like that, we still did our Night to Shine this year, but we sent out the packages to everybody. So for each of those individuals, maybe within whatever the issues are, to receive that package in the mail and then to connect with them just virtually a little bit made a difference. So again, receiving, there's other ways we can connect with people through gifts and dropping a meal, or just a card, or even something that was special to them, that they feel loved. And I think that's really, really important for every individual.
Yeah, absolutely. For our viewers that don't know, what are in the packages for Right to Shine?
Well, in those, it was a crown, and I think they got some party favors, like, different items that they could kind of have a celebration together, because that was what it was. Night to Shine was a celebration, like almost like a graduation for them. And so that was what they would receive in their package. And then we just encourage them just to connect with a photo and send that back, to our team here. And then at least it was another event, different, but it was something that they got used to look forward to yearly, and that didn't stop. It just was different. That's all.
Right. Now, what about for children? Any thoughts on how to get kids engaged and not to fall into that pit of loneliness, or that pit of just all that screen time too?
Well, you see a lot of people doing very unique things, like drive-bys for birthday parties. I know both of my grandkids, we visited them through COVID at times, sometimes through a window, or through Zoom, or FaceTime. But you can get pretty creative in getting things active with kids. But I also know that kids are really good at connecting online. They've done that for years, where they've got gamer friends and game tags that they are connected with, and that's, they're sitting in their basement, for hours on end. But I think the important part, what you mentioned on, was how do you get them out? And as parents, like a scooter, a skateboard, any kind of gift that gets them outdoors is probably the best for them right at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it's ironic because we want to keep our kids off the screen. There's too much screen time going on. But during COVID, like you said, I mean, it's a great way for them to connect. So you almost are kind of almost thankful for all that screen time. They can connect with other communities, like you said, gamer communities and whatnot. But absolutely exercise and get outside now that it's springtime, especially, right?
Yes, exactly.
And then, of course, where would we be without the Word of God, right? Seeking His presence. And
That's very true. I'm going to share a little scripture with you guys. 1 Peter 3 says, "Who's going to harm you if you're eager to do good? But even if you should suffer from what is right, you are blessed. Don't fear threats. Do not be frightened, but in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks, and give a reason that the hope that you have." And that's one thing we can share during this whole season and continue to share, is that we do have the hope of Christ in our lives, and He has a purpose for us. And if you want to partner with an organization, I think that's a really good way to battle loneliness, is to get out and help someone else who's also in need. And you're likely to make a connection that way if you're empathetic to their situation, and you're managing your own personal mental health as well. But I think this is a real time for the church to shine and care for our communities.
absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us today, Pastor Ralph. We really appreciated having you on.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. Ralph Molyneux is the site pastor at My Victory Church in Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.